Dangai Ichigo is a tortured soul. What's going on, guys? Rebirth here to give you the latest edition in the Ichigo series on the channel. If you've missed the last 3 chapters on Soul Society, Arrancar, and Wakemundo Ichigo, please look in the tag videos to catch up. Today we venture into Ichigo's involvement in the battle in Fake Karakura Town that saw the Gotei 13 clash against Aizen and his army. The Fake Karakura Town arc places Ichigo under even more pressure than he had in Wakemundo, and his flaws are magnified to an even greater degree, buried beneath the weight of expectations that lie on his shoulders. When you peel back the layers of Ichigo's character in this arc, you find that Dangai Ichigo is a truly tortured, conflicted soul. Before we begin, please be sure to hit that subscribe button for me. You know, the one that's right there in the bottom right corner. Yeah, that one. Just hit that for me and everything's PG. Thank you guys, I really appreciate the support. But anyway, back to the point. Ichigo Kurosaki. Right. Ichigo heads to Karakura Town with Unohana Retsu after Mayuri Kuretsuchi manages to open the Garganta to the world of the living. As Ichigo and Unohana travel towards their destination, Kubo gives some much needed clarification on the details concerning Ichigo's Bankai. As we come to find out, Ichigo's Bankai does not merely change the size and shape of his sword, it also materializes a cloak that he wears, and the cloak in of itself is part of Ichigo's Bankai. Furthermore, he explains that the cloak is a representation of how much spirit energy reserves Ichigo has. This is just a tiny little detail that puts Ichigo's fight with Ulquiorra into perspective. When Ichigo lost control and White took over, he dominated the supposed strongest Espada, at least in my book. He did all of that, all the feats, all the displays of power, they all happened while White had access to only less than half of Ichigo's full power. Ichigo had one sleeve and barely any cloak left after his initial fight with Ulquiorra, and White was still able to completely destroy the 4th Espada. Unohana decides to heal Ichigo as they run towards the end of the Garganta. On the way there, Ichigo is thinking of what his game plan is going to be, and just to make sure his readers realize the scale of the burden lying on Ichigo's shoulders, Kubo has Unohana reiterate the stakes of the battle. Anyone who has fallen prey to Aizen's Kyoga Suigetsu is unlikely to be able to defeat him. The only one with a legitimate chance to defeat Aizen is Ichigo, and so he needs to be primed and ready to take Aizen down. Ichigo understood that and decided that he would strike first and strike hard, which he did. Only issue is, Ichigo did not holify and Aizen ends up deflecting his blast. Now, the outcome wouldn't have changed even if Ichigo holified. Aizen had measures in place to protect himself, but this is Kubo's way of allowing you to know the pressure Ichigo is feeling right now. Between the expectation that he is the only one who can defeat Aizen, he himself is reeling from his Hollow's destruction. After parrying Ichigo's attack, Aizen and Ichigo have a verbal exchange that I think is very interesting to consider. An example of the criticism laid at the foot of Kubo in relation to the Aizen arc as a whole is how detached Ichigo seems to be from the main antagonist. To Kubo detractors, Ichigo and Aizen's conflict doesn't seem personal, and they believe that it takes away from what should have been an intimate personal back and forth between the two. And whenever I hear that, my reaction is always the same. Pump the brakes, and instead of thinking of how you think something should be, simply ask, why is it this way? Because for all you know, the author understands this and has a reason for writing the story this way. So allow me to ask this very straightforward question. Did Ichigo need to have a personal vendetta against Aizen? No.
And that's all, folks.
Okay, I know I should explain myself more, and I promise I will, but let's come back to that later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Aizen battles the entire Gotei 13 by himself and destroys them all. He utilizes Wonder Wise to neutralize Ryujin Jaka, and it's not until Yamamoto uses Ito Kaso that Ichigo finally gets an opportunity to catch Aizen off guard. Ichigo holifies and fires a Getsugatenshou right at Aizen, and he takes damage, but it's not enough damage to bother Aizen. Aizen continues to play his mind games on Ichigo, talking about how he orchestrated Ichigo's battles up until now, which he did, and he claims to know Ichigo's true identity and lineage, which he does know. Isshin ultimately stops Aizen from revealing the truth, and when you observe Ichigo's reaction throughout this entire interaction with Aizen, it's very clear that not only is Ichigo vastly unprepared to go up against a man of this level, his internal balance is making him even less competent than he actually is. I was rereading the arc, and seeing Ichigo burst out like a little child was very unbecoming of him. You may disagree with me on this opinion, but even though Ichigo is an extremely passionate individual, he never lashes out like a child. Not until now. When I think back to how scared he was to fight Kenpachi, he was 100% flustered, but it felt like the fear of a man who was up against a massively overpowering monster. Even when he was actually depressed, it felt like the depressed state of an adult. But here, He's made to look immature and naive when he interacts with Aizen, and I suppose that is cause to credit Sosuke Aizen because he had Ichigo in the palm of his hands without actually fighting. And it does serve as more proof that Ichigo right now is not prepared to battle at this stage. Maybe he has the spiritual power necessary, but his emotional and psychological state is falling painfully behind. We get a glimpse of the Ichigo we know when Isshin saves him and wants to discuss him being a Soul Reaper later. Ichigo tells his father that, hey, you probably had your reasons for not telling me, but whenever you feel the time is right, I'll listen. In what has been a very long spell of immature tantrum Ichigo, seeing the mature side of him was refreshing, even if it only lasted for a little while. Isshin and Ichigo rejoin the battle, and this time, Ichigo's opponent is the talented Gim Ichimaru, who is looking forward to battling Ichigo a second time. Ichigo, on the other hand, doesn't remember fighting Gin because, as Kubo explains to us, Ichigo has this innate ability to see into the hearts of his opponents. He can sense what type of people they are and feel what is in their hearts. Think about the whole Naruto Sasuke clash where they end up in a separate space and can talk to each other through their attacks. Or, if you're a Chad like me, Magi. Magi had this idea in its story as well, where the clash of Rook saw characters speak into each other's heart. So Ichigo doesn't remember fighting Gin because he doesn't remember feeling what was in his heart. It felt blank and off-putting. Gin is mildly amused by this and activates his Bankai. I'm not going to break down the contents of this fight right here, but I will say that this was a very solid showing for both Ichigo and Gin, but the winner of this battle and the stronger individual here is very clear. Gim Ichimaru. Their battles spill over into Isshin's fight as Aizen is ascending and Kisuke and Yoruichi join the battle. As Aizen is clowning Isshin, Kisuke, and Yoruichi, Gin sneaks up behind Ichigo and doesn't want to fight. He wants to take a break and talk. What ensues here between Gin and Ichigo is fairly important for what will happen soon. So Gin's trying to convince Ichigo to give up because Aizen is going to be victorious. Ichigo tries to actually push back at Gin by insinuating that if Aizen gets any stronger, he might decide to turn on Ichimaru and kill him personally. This statement by Ichigo turns Ichimaru off and he starts to wonder if Ichigo has already given up in this battle. Ichigo can barely keep his mask on for extended periods of time and his willpower is massively waning. Gin believes now that a kid like Ichigo has no place fighting Lord Aizen, and so he tells him, just run away. You're not a warrior anymore. And the reason he's disappointed in Ichigo is that when he first met Ichigo in Soul Society, he wasn't the strongest. Hell, he was barely lieutenant level, but what he had was conviction and belief in himself and what he was there to do. And despite the massive gaps in their powers, Gin respected that. And he gave that Ichigo a better chance of defeating him than the Bankai holified Ichigo that stands before him now. Aizen interferes before Gin attacks Ichigo, and he along with Gim Ichimaru open the Senkaimon and head towards the Soul Society. Aizen has successfully defeated Isshin, Kisuke, and Yoruichi. Ichigo is left in a pile of rubble to mull over his failings when his father grabs him and beckons him to head to Soul Society, and I want to stop here just to observe and analyze this interaction. I have found that most general audiences do not enjoy the deconstruction of characters, especially those who are expected to be the flag bearers of a much larger idea. For example, an anime protagonist who is massively deconstructed tends to turn most people off, because it's hard or annoying to see your main character have his weaknesses exposed to this level. Think of Natsuki Subaru in Re:Zero, who is constantly being deconstructed and his weaknesses are constantly being shoved right into his face. Some people don't enjoy that, but I do. The reason I enjoy deconstruction so much is because it's realistic. It grounds the character in ways other writing methods cannot. The more weaknesses and failings I see in a character, the more human they seem. After all, you all might know the popular saying, to err is human. That's why I appreciate Ichigo here. But not just that. Even if you put my love for deconstruction to the side, look at the situation as Kubo presents it. Aizen has ascended by way of the Hogyoku to a level surpassing Soul Reapers and Hollows. They cannot sense his energy. They do not know how powerful he is. For that reason, it is easier for them to block out their natural bodily instinct to flee from overwhelming power. Ichigo is the only one on the battlefield who can feel just how powerful Aizen is. Isn't it a little naive and insensitive to call a man a coward when you yourself cannot feel the power he feels? It is not a simple black and white situation, it's heavily grayed. And this plays into the question I posed before about Ichigo lacking a personal vendetta against Aizen. Isshin tells Ichigo, think about what Aizen going to Karakura Town means. It means everyone you know and love in Karakura Town are about to die at the hands of Aizen. He tells Ichigo, are you going to sit there and cry again about how you can't save anyone? These words carry a lot of weight because Kubo is reinforcing the criticisms people have against Ichigo versus Aizen. There seems to be little to no personal vendetta here. It seems to be a responsibility placed onto Ichigo because no one else is able to. So Isshin opens the Senkaimon and they travel through the precipice world, and here we run into one of Kubo's biggest blunders. This is the advent of the Final Getsugatenshou. What can I say about the Final Getsugatenshou that hasn't been said before? I suppose I can give you a different perspective on the matter, but if it was of any concern to you, yes, there was no foreshadowing. Yes, this came out of nowhere, at least to me. Yes, Kubo probably dropped the ball on this one, and yes, it might showcase that Kubo did not have a clear idea of how to defeat Aizen without making it seem unearned. That is all true, but allow me to come at the situation from a different angle. Instead of thinking about how bad of a decision this was, what if we think about what positive possibilities came as a result of it? Yeah, I know it's weird, but let's break it down. I've always had a certain principle when it comes to power-ups in manga and storytelling, and it's very simple. For every power that is given, there must be a cost. For every overwhelming ability that is given, there must be something lost of supreme value. Imagine you had a character who gained a massive spike in power, but had no drawback or repercussion for that power boost. How legitimate would the power-up feel? This has always been the recurring problem with a show like Fairy Tail. Due to the powers of friendship, these characters gain massive spikes in power with little to no loss to themselves. But there must always be a pushback, a cost, and a rationalization. Super Saiyan Goku came at a cost, Krillin's life. But then they bring him back with the Dragon Balls and renders the price for that power obsolete. And you can go through many different popular shows and you will find that most authors understand that there has to be a price for power. Naruto, the price for Baryon mode is Kurama's life, and I hope it remains that way. If Kishimoto walks that back, it is going to be absolutely terrible to stomach. Monkey D. Luffy, during Impel Down, received steroids at the hands of Ivankov, which allowed him to push beyond his natural limits at the cost of his lifespan. The power came with a cost, and I believe Oda will not forget that fact. Gon Freaks gives up his Nen in order to kill his enemy, and not only basically lost his life in the process, he definitely lost his Nen and is now struggling to figure out how to retain it. Natsu Dragonil's Fire Dragon King mode gives him a tremendous power boost, but the price for it is the last remaining vestiges of Ignil's flames. Or Eren and other Titan shifters, the price for that ability means you will only live for the next 13 years. A price for power. And so you come to Ichigo, and Kubo, for better or worse, introduces a massive power spike for Ichigo, and the cost for this power is all of Ichigo's spirit energy. That is the price to be paid. So essentially, as much as I agree with those who criticize Kubo for the Final Getsugatenshou, I recognize the good that came of it. And Ichigo eventually earns his power back, yes, but not before Kubo makes him earn it in the Fullbreak arc. So that's my personal opinion on the Final Getsugatenshou as a plot point for Bleach. It was a bad choice that yielded positive results. Okay, let's pivot and talk about Ichigo's battle with Zangetsu. First thing, Ichigo's world is submerged in water, and we know this to be the case because Ichigo's heart was overtaken by despair and sadness, causing it to rain on this lonely world. Tensho Zangetsu pulls out White and they merge to battle Ichigo. As I've explained in my other videos on the subject, Ichigo is able to feel what his opponents have in their heart, and Ichigo feels nothing but sadness emanating from Tensho Zangetsu's blade. That is indicative of not merely Old Man Zangetsu's opinion and feelings, but White's as well. Both of his inner spirits are very clear when they say, "What I want to protect is not what you want to protect." Ichigo eventually figures out how to win this fight and gets impaled by the blade. Witnessing Tensho Zangetsu shed tears of pain, Ichigo finally understands what his power will require in return. So back in Karakura, Gin has just betrayed Aizen, and Aizen has now struck the finishing blow onto Gin. As he prepares to finish the job, Ichigo Kurosaki emerges from the Dangai with long hair, a chain wrapped around his arm, and a Zanpakuto toe that is fused to his hand. This is the introduction of Dangai Ichigo. So, let us talk about Dangai Ichigo. Dangai Ichigo is Kubo basically telling all of us that the faults and failures of Ichigo's character are something that he knows about and deliberately writes into existence. Dangai Ichigo is who people expect Ichigo to be. Calm, cool, collected, analytical, unwavering, soft-spoken, and deadly. There's no showboating, no needless verbal jabs, no lashing out with emotion, no temper tantrums, and no immaturity. He is straightforward, definite, and lethal, as people wanted him to be. But the genius here, the Kubology in these moments, is that it's not Ichigo. Dangai Ichigo as a character, as a person, is not Ichigo. This being you see in front of you is a pained, tortured soul. He is suffering on every level except physical pain. And Kubo masterfully shows you this through expression and speech patterns, something you can sense even more of when you watch the voice actors. The look on his face, it's just bland. He's just there. He looks tired. Like seriously, look at him. He looks tired and completely done with the situation. Gim Ichimaru takes a look into his eyes and sees that his eyes are stronger. Yes, absolutely, they are stronger. But they are as tortured as they are strong. And as you watch or read Ichigo's battle with Aizen, I find myself asking, why is Kubo doing this? Especially in hindsight, we have seen Dangai Ichigo, a form born from Ichigo's understanding of his powers, not submission, but a reluctant concession to Ichigo. They did not want to do this, but were forced into doing so by Ichigo. On the other side, you have the final arc, Ichigo's True Zanpakuto, where he truly understood and resonated with his powers, and they willingly gave themselves up. The Ichigo that is born from True Zanpakuto synergy is different from the Ichigo born from forced Zanpakuto synergy. In one, Ichigo is happy, he's confident, and he's comfortable in his own skin and in his mission. But here, he looks sad, depressed, and uncomfortable the entire time. And I'm sure you can see why Kubo made sure to have that distinction. Power gained by force is different from power gained by willful submission. But it's not just that. It goes deeper. You know how at the start of the video, I asked the question as to if Ichigo needed to have a personal vendetta against Aizen? Well, now I can give you my answer with full context. The reason Ichigo does not need to have a personal vendetta against Aizen is because Kubo is attempting to tell a story of the self-sacrificial nature of a protector. At the end of the day, people can point to Aizen orchestrating Ichigo's battles and whatnot, but I believe that ultimately, Ichigo had more beef with Ulquiorra than Aizen. He had more beef with Grimjaw and Byakuya than he did Aizen. That's just a fact. The reason this works so well here is that Kubo is using Ichigo kinda like how the Judeo-Christian Jesus exists in the Bible. And I know, what in the world is he on about? Just humor me for a second. As the story goes, whether you believe it or not, just humor me for the moment. Humans are sinful and for that reason unfit to enter heaven. In order for the gift of salvation to be given, there must be a price paid for the sins that were committed. God the Father decides that because he loves humanity so much, he will instead send his son, Jesus, to earth to live as a man, blameless and sinless, and then have this man, who is unfit to be punished, take on the punishment of those who are actually deserving and die in their place, so that they, standing on the principle of his sacrifice, can receive the eternal gift of salvation. That's basically the idea there. I'm not saying that Kubo is using Jesus as a template because I don't think he is. I'm just comparing them to make a point that what Kubo wants to do here is make it so that Ichigo doesn't actually have a huge gripe with Aizen. He doesn't hate Aizen. Aizen may have done some things that ended up causing Ichigo pain or whatever, but he has no desire to kill him. I mean, Ichigo beat Ikkaku and saved his life. He fought to the death against Renji and Byakuya and didn't fight them out of hatred. Even Grimjaw, who Ichigo had a personal grudge against, Ichigo made sure to grab him after the fight and protect him from Noitora. And he had a bigger bone to pick with them than with Aizen. And so Kubo is going to great lengths to establish that Ichigo really doesn't want to fight Aizen. It's not really his fight, but that's exactly the point. In the same way that Jesus, who actually never sinned, is tasked with taking on the punishment of humanity by another, Ichigo, who doesn't feel like he has personal hatred for Aizen, has this responsibility given to him without his consent. He did not choose to be in this position. It just so happened that because you have not seen a Shikai, you are the only one who can defeat him. And this massive responsibility is given to a 15-year-old. Like, here, you do it. You save the world. You defeat Aizen even though his crimes really have to do with centuries-old events. You're the only one who can do it, and oh, by the way, the only way to actually beat him is to give up your powers as a price. Do you see how unfair this is? Ichigo is a substitute Soul Reaper who hasn't been reaping for a year now. He's barely begun his life as a Shinigami. There's an actual organization whose task is to stop events like this. They're called the Gote 13, and they all failed to do their job, and now a 15-year-old is being asked to give up all of his powers to defend a world that really isn't his responsibility. That's the point Kubo is getting at. It's not really Ichigo's fight to do this. It's not really his job, but that responsibility has been forcefully placed onto him. And on top of that, the price for the power you need to win is the loss of your own. Why wouldn't you be saddened by this? What's there to smile about? There's absolutely nothing to be happy about. And that's why Dangai Ichigo looks so tortured. That's why he looks so saddened and empty. Because he is having to make a sacrifice for the sake of the entire world when really, he should be nowhere near this battle. It takes a special kind of man to accept the wrong responsibility of sacrificing your powers, what makes you special, for the sake of the world. That is the kind of man Ichigo is, and that is what Kubo wanted to share with us. As labored and tired as Ichigo was, he finally becomes so done with the entire situation that he activates the Final Getsugatenshou and becomes Getsuga itself. I tend to think of this in a different way than others do. I've always looked at the Final Getsugatenshou as a form. He becomes Getsuga, and taking on this new form means that his next attack will be the last. So in other words, the actual attack is not a standard Getsugatenshou, but rather a new move called Mugetsu, the Moonless Night. And I think it's fitting that the final move is called Moonless Night. The night in of itself casts a dreary, sad outlook on most things, but usually, the moon gives us just a little bit of light to help us through the long nights. But the darkest nights are those that do not have the moon, and that is what Mugetsu represents, the Moonless Night. Aizen somehow remains alive and Kisuke's healing Kido takes effect. Aizen is consequently sealed, and Ichigo tells Urahara that the only emotion emanating from Aizen's blade was that of loneliness. Ichigo's power leaves him, and days later, he says his final goodbye to Rukia. You know, Ichigo means the #1 protector, and I think he lived up to his namesake, going as far as to give up his powers in order to save the world, knowing that he might never become a Soribur again. That counts for something in my eyes. Ichigo up until now, after battling Ulquiorra, has been plagued with negative thoughts and failures. He's really hurting on the inside, and Dangai Ichigo, with all his powers and badassery, to me, is an extremely potent, powerful, but ultimately tortured soul, and a strong example of what true self-sacrifice means. This is your boy Rebirth. Next week, Full Rank Arc Ichigo is underrated. Please hit the like, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you then. Road to 15K, let's get it.